Cheney, and Schwerner were a trio of deaths in the whole string of murders in Mississippi. James, I'm telling you, of all the leaders I met that summer, I never met one so resolute as she spoke about the cost of the cause. Mickey and I were working in Oxford with the volunteers when we received news of a church burning in Meridian. Mickey and Andrew Goodman left to investigate. The next morning, I got the call. Mickey, James, and Andrew were missing. I was stunned. I asked them to help find them. I asked them to call their congressmen, news reporters, and anyone who would apply pressure. The government had to find the men and provide protection for all of us. The next day, I met with President Johnson. Mr. President, this is not a social call. I've come to find my husband. People are being murdered, brutalized, and we've got to send thousands for protection. He sent the FBI to investigate. And 44 days after the disappearance, their bodies were found. They had been shot, beaten, and buried. No one was held responsible for their murders. After the funerals, Rita stayed. So did the volunteers. Their refusal to give up, to walk away, demonstrated their commitment to the cause. The deaths of the 3 civil rights workers focused the nation's attention on Mississippi and brought momentum for the movement, including the establishment of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. For the first time, blacks united and fought for their right to be a political force in Mississippi. The Freedom Summer Project changed Mississippi and left a lasting legacy. It was one of the forces that compelled President Lyndon B. Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act in 1965. This law prohibited discriminatory practices in voting. By the end of 1966, black voter registration rose from only 6.4% to 60%. Freedom Summer opened up doors for African Americans. Today, Mississippi has more black elected officials than any other state. The election of our country's first African American president has its roots in Freedom Summer. Under the determined leadership of Mississippians like Fannie Lou Hamer, the calm courage of civic leader Bob Moses, the idealism of hundreds of student volunteers, the resolute leadership of Rita Schwerner, and the noble sacrifice of 3 civil rights workers, freedom came to Mississippi. I'm going down to Mississippi. I'm going down a southern road. And if you never see me again, remember that I had to go. Remember that I had to go. James, freedom is always on my mind.
Best resource for information?
That's a very tough question. There were numerous resources that I thought were extremely helpful, one of which would have to be Bob Moses, who I actually portrayed in my piece. We got an interview with him through David Goodman, who was Andrew Goodman's brother, one of the slain civil rights workers, and we contacted him by interviewing David Goodman, sorry. He got us in contact with his assistant for the Algebra Project, and his name was Benjamin Muhammad, I believe. And so we interviewed Bob Moses, and he was just so humble. And the fact that even Patty Miller, who we also interviewed, who was a volunteer during the time, couldn't get an interview with him. She told us she couldn't get an interview with him. And the fact that we got to interview with him, and it took 4 months, was extremely... he had a place for my heart whenever he was speaking. We actually asked him, could you describe yourself in 1 word? And it was just pure silence for about, I'd say 2 minutes. Because I was expecting leader, but he didn't say anything. And so it made me emotional. And he would have to be one of my best resources, by far.
Did you have questions?
Well,
should I talk some more?
no, it was on interviews, but I was going to ask something similar on Mrs. Bender.
Oh, Rita.
How you got the interview and what she was like? And...
Oh, gosh. She was amazing. It was, during the interview, it was myself, my mother, and my teacher, and we were asking her questions reading down the line. And the one thing I remember, she was just so forceful, and she knew exactly what she was going to say throughout every question that we asked. And she really thought that Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman, and James Chaney deaths shouldn't have been that noticed. She thought that the grassroots, like Fannie Lou Hamer, the people who lived during the time, who were arrested, beaten, and murdered, those African-American people should have gotten the most credit because they were the ones who had to fight for their right to vote. And so she was just so forceful, and she was very helpful as well.
If you had more time, is there anything else you would have included?
Oh, definitely more on the opposing side. We did get, we found an interview online of Willie Peacock, who he was a black man, black slave worker, but he was against it, and because 3 reasons. One, they couldn't fund the African-American volunteers who would help their fellow African-Americans to vote. They couldn't fund them. They would have to pay for themselves. 2, it was very dangerous. As you can see, there were many deaths. And 3, a few years back, I believe it was in '61, these Harvard students came down, and they were in a local library in Mississippi, and they asked them if everything was all right, if the blacks were being treated okay in the library, if they had the same rights as whites did. And they lied to them. They told them that, oh, everything's fine and dandy, you know, we're all right. But the African Americans knew they're lying. And so Willie was kind of against having white volunteers come down because he thought they could do the same thing. You know, kind of turn their backs on them. But I'd love to get more on the opposing side, definitely.
Any other questions you have? Thank you.
Thank you.